The architectural blueprint for the centralized modern superpower was originally engineered in the year 1536 in Tudor England. In a matter of years, the state dismantled nearly 900 religious houses. It displaced 1 in every 50 adult men, the greatest dislocation of people and property in British history since the Norman conquest. Standard historical narratives frame this as a religious schism or the fallout of a royal divorce. However, these perspectives overlook the mechanical reality of the event. The state executed a clinical takeover of the national architecture. This process is defined as sovereign alchemy, a rigorous system of creative destruction executed at the state level. The Tudor state decomposed the decentralized medieval order to harvest its raw materials, transmuting frozen spiritual assets into the mechanical gears of a centralized state. King Henry VIII initiated this centralization. His legal elevation to supreme head in 1534 provided the administrative mechanism required for absolute authority. The operational goal was to take a chaotic, localized society and surgically recast it into an imperial machine. To achieve this, the state broke down old institutions to extract their prime matter, the base physical and intellectual resources left in the ruins. Processing this prime matter required 3 core principles. First, knowledge as sovereign capital. Second, bureaucratic transmutation. And third, state narrative control. By hollowing out the medieval world, the Crown created a structural void that could only be filled by the inescapable, centralized presence of the sovereign. Phase 1 of this process is the strategic negredo. This is an orchestrated, state-sponsored decay of institutional competitors to clear the landscape. Using a legislative mechanism known alchemically as calcination, the Crown applied the high heat of physical violence and legal pressure to reduce complex, centuries-old structures to malleable ash. This diagram illustrates Phase 2, material liquidation. The state acts as the heat source, converting frozen spiritual energy, wealth locked in tradition and stone, into liquid state assets. The Crown achieved this through the desanctification of the horizon. By stripping the lead roofs from the nation's abbeys, the state removed the protective barrier between heaven and earth. This left behind a physical husk. Stone ruins like Whitby Abbey demonstrate the literal ash remaining after the calcination process. Inside these ruins, the state seized stationary shrine wealth, reliquaries, and sacred art, melting them down into fluid currency. This newly liquefied currency was redirected with a specific purpose: funding the English Crown's first professional, permanent maritime force. This physical liquidation established the state's monopoly on kinetic force. The spiritual shielding of the abbeys was recast into ballistic power. The physical liquidation of lead and gold was only the extraction of the husk. The prize was the intellectual kernel hidden inside. The 1536 dissolution functioned as a major clandestine intelligence operation. The state targeted monastic scriptoria, treating them as 16th-century research and development centers. The objective was to annex sequestered hermetic and scientific manuscripts, weaponizing ancient knowledge as a functional mechanic of state power. In Phase 3, the intellectual harvest, the Crown built its intelligence network by weaponizing 3 specific scientific domains. The first was advanced metallurgy. Annexed alchemical texts allowed the state to master the purity of national coinage and improve the casting of heavy bronze artillery. The second domain was pharmacology. By nationalizing botanical health records, the state managed workforce readiness, such as curing scurvy in naval crews, as a managed asset. This established the concept of population biopower. The third domain was global navigation. State mathematicians applied the principle of as above, so below, using sequestered astronomical texts to refine maritime positioning. This astronomical data was applied to the engineering of the technological tools required for long-range voyages. Through this intellectual harvest, the Tudor state monopolized economic value, kinetic force, and geographic space. The state moved from a passive observer of knowledge to the sole proprietor of national intelligence. The sudden massive influx of liquidated wealth and raw data presented a systemic problem. Without a master administrative architecture, this entropy would destabilize the state. Thomas Cromwell operated as the political alchemist tasked with the systematization of entropy, the construction of a professional civil service. He executed Phase 4, bureaucratic transmutation, applying the alchemical concept of fixed salt to sociology. Cromwell created the new gentry by redistributing stolen monastic land, making a rising elite class vested shareholders in the liquidated landscape. These elites became financial hostages to the crown. To rebel against the sovereign meant destroying the legal foundation of their own wealth. Cromwell transmuted political volatility into administrative fixity. Maintaining a physical fleet requires a psychologically synchronized populace. This necessitated Phase 5, narrative synchronization, centering the subject's identity on the sovereign. We see this temporal shift modeled here. The unpredictable rhythms of the liturgical calendar were replaced by a singular, centralized mechanism, the imperial clock. Standardized time and mechanical reliability are prerequisites for global empire. This clock allowed the state to coordinate global labor and execute precise naval movements. The climax of this 10-year transmutation arrived in 1546 with the establishment of the Permanent Navy Royal. This military expansion was the result of a land-to-sea transmutation, built from the liquidated property, melted reliquaries, and sequestered intelligence of the 1536 operation. The intellectual harvest of advanced metallurgy translated into the ballistic reality mounted on the decks of these ships. The 1536 operation established the structural precedents that define the modern state. The monastic scriptoria functioned as the high-density information hubs of their age. By sequestering their contents, the state established a template for the centralized management of national intelligence. This birthed the enduring principle of knowledge as sovereign capital, the absolute aggregation of data to manage a unified national narrative. We navigate a body politic first unified in 1536, operating within a reality defined by the sovereign's centralized data infrastructures and its monopoly on information and time.